Welcome to Economy Map. Almost every activity in a modern industrial economy causes some environmental impact. Some activities cause direct impacts, like cutting down trees, whose loss damages forest ecology, and some activities cause indirect impacts, like operating office buildings whose electricity comes from power plants that release toxic emissions to air, water, and soil. The question is, which activities, in which sectors, in which supply chains are the most significant contributors to which impacts across the entire economy? And by extension, which activities should be the focus of which types of policy approaches? When is regulation appropriate? When are market-based approaches more effective? How does sustainable production and consumption fit in? What about supply chain engagement? If we want to answer these questions well, we need a way to represent, analyze, understand, and prioritize the full complexity of the U.S. economy and its environmental impacts at the scale of industry sectors and supply chains. Fortunately, we now have tools to do exactly that, and Economy Map is one of those tools. Economy Map is an interactive visual map of the United States economy and its environmental impacts. For example, I can use Economy Map to see which industrial sectors in the U.S. economy are the most significant contributors to global warming. On the left side of the screen, each orange circle represents a major industrial sector in the U.S. economy, and the size of each circle represents that sector's contribution to global warming. In the sidebar on the right, the top section explains how global warming is measured, and the bottom section shows the top 20 sectors that contribute to global warming. Electric services, or utilities for instance, contributes 35% of all global warming impacts. Or I can use Economy Map to see which sectors contribute the most toxic pollution to our rivers and lakes. In this case, 40% of all freshwater toxic pollution is caused by the cotton industry. Both of these maps, for global warming and for freshwater toxicity, show the direct impacts of each sector. The direct impacts perspective is particularly useful in thinking about which sectors to target for direct regulation or for sustainable production strategies, because these are the sectors that are generating the most significant direct, on-site environmental impacts. But Economy Map can also display information from other perspectives. For example, I can use Economy Map to see which sectors cause significant upstream environmental impacts. Staying with freshwater ecotoxicity, from the final consumption perspective, we can see that consumer demand for apparel is responsible for almost 17% of all the freshwater ecotoxicity impacts in the U.S. economy. And consumer demand for eating and drinking places, in other words for restaurants, is responsible for almost 7%. This perspective, the final consumption perspective, is particularly useful in targeting sectors for sustainable consumption strategies, because these are the sectors that are creating the economic demand that, upstream, creates the most significant environmental impacts. Economy Map also includes a third perspective, the intermediate consumption perspective, which tends to highlight those sectors which generate significant impact through a combination of their own on-site direct activities and the upstream impacts of consumer demand for their services. In the case of freshwater ecotoxicity, for instance, fabric mills rank number 2 because the combination of the direct and upstream impacts represent over 8% of all the freshwater ecotoxicity impacts in the U.S. economy. The intermediate consumption perspective is a more complicated perspective, but it is useful for targeting sectors for sustainable supply chain engagement. Clicking on any sector in Economy Map highlights that sector and shows a table of environmental impacts in the sidebar. As we scroll through the table on the right, the map on the left changes to show the overall economy map for each of 13 major environmental impact categories, with the selected sector highlighted. Economy Map can also be used to display maps of financial activity in the U.S. economy. Each of the lines on the left represent a flow of goods and services between two sectors. In this display, only flows valued at more than $1 billion per year are shown. As with environmental impacts, all 480 sectors can be displayed by relative size according to their volume of sales, and the sidebar shows a ranking of the top 20 sectors by sales. Clicking on any sector shows more detailed financial information about the sector and its relationship to other sectors. For example, clicking on industrial, inorganic, and organic chemicals shows the major sectors that purchase from the chemicals sector, in black, and the major sectors that sell to the chemicals sector, in red. The relative magnitude of these sales and purchases can also be displayed. This view can be used in combination with the environmental impacts view to understand the flow of environmental impact through the economy. So that's a preview of some of what's possible in the beta version of Economy Map. Ultimately, we hope that Economy Map will be a valuable resource for public interest advocates and policymakers to help them identify and prioritize opportunities to reduce environmental impacts. We think that it can also serve as an educational resource for broader audiences. Economy Map is a work in progress. Currently, the data displayed are incomplete and reflect somewhat outdated financial and environmental information from 1998. In the future, we seek to supplement and update this data to enhance the accuracy of Economy Map. We are also working to more tightly integrate the financial and environmental maps so that users can visually trace the flow of environmental impacts from sector to sector through the economy. Please stay tuned.